So good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Agla, for the beautiful words. And I would like to welcome all of you, our Nordic artist and the curator, to this panel discussion and to the triennial. We're very happy to host you here in Kaunas. In fact, the city that I was born. So very happy to have you all here. So my name is Agnė Skopaitė, and I am the project manager of the Vilnius Painting Triennial this year. And I would like to introduce our participants of the discussion. So we have the curator, Henrik Andersen. We have Even Andersen from Denmark, the artist. We have Torben Ribe from Denmark, Tamara Piilola from Finland, Ilija Wyller from Norway, and Erik Jeor from Sweden. So thank you very much for being here today with us. So let's get to the questions and let's start this very interesting discussion. Thank you. So perhaps I would like to start from the title of the triennial, which is called I'm Here Not to Be Tolerated, but to Provoke You. And this title, the idea of this title came from the artist's perspective, who creates in response to the global and personal issues, changes and challenges. So I would like to hear from each of you, how do you interpret this title? Do you speak of the current global or perhaps personal issues through your art practice? And if yes, which topics interest you today and why?
First of all, I think most of my work is not really related to so much things that occur around the world. I did do one painting that was like a support for Ukraine. But generally, I'm more like interested and inspired by natural physics and so on. So I should probably be more engaged in the environment in my art and so on, but at the moment it's not a big part.
If not some global current issues, other topics that you talk through your practice, maybe a little bit more, a couple of more words?
I think it's more inspired by everyday observations and becoming sort of a collage of something I see in the street and something I see on the internet and random photos I see and take and stuff I put together from that.
Thank you. Torben?
Yeah, to answer the same question. Yeah, it's more in an indirect way that the surrounding world interferes with my work. So I'm more occupied with how the art relates to what we could call the everyday life and reality. So what happens if you take a self-secure abstract painting and push it out into the realm, into reality and see what happens. So that cross-section between, traditional art and everyday life and big and small problems, and it could be political, economic, or personal problems. They all find a way into my practice, but it's more from a personal point of view than I'm not trying to make political art or something, but I think all good art is political, so that's what I'm hoping for, that it's through my personal lens that it will say something about the world that surrounds me. So, yeah.
And could you give a couple of examples of the topics?
Yeah, sure. If you go to see the exhibition later on, I have 7 works with them in there, and they all kind of relates to this idea of abstract art that somehow has failed. I like to work with painting because it has this really problematic background, in my view. It's really like the beginner media per se. Everybody starts with painting and then move on to something else when they go to the art academy, mostly. And it's also the most commercial media of them all. And that, that feeling of have your back against the wall is a really nice starting point for me. That it's a really problematic media, and I like that. So that's my starting point. And then I try to make really good, solid abstract paintings, but it kind of fails most of the time of various reasons. Too little time, too little patience, too little economy, and little kids that keep you distracted, and all this everyday stuff that drags the perfect work down. And so that's the framework that I'm working in.
Thank you.
I work with mostly with nature subjects, and I think the subject makes it very political, but I'm not into politics at all, and I'm not trying to say something political about my work, but they become political usually. Sometimes people come and ask me, you must be a really like pro and environmentalist or something like that. And I kind of am, but I'm not, I don't want to push it in my work. I think it sort of filters through. I think artists are filters for the world, for the contemporary world.
Thank you.
I work with landscapes, but more in a broader term. So it's about the transitions between the self and one's environment. So I'm interested in decentralizing myself in meeting with the world, so I'm equal to the environment that I'm in. It's more based on observation, and I reenact experience and transitions between how you experience something when you see something, how it reminds you of a memory or something else, a picture, something that happened, and all of this is simultaneous. And then so that experience in itself is kind of, doesn't have a narrative, so it just unfolds naturally. So obviously, as you said, a filter, I can resonate with that and filter my environment in a similar way. So it's both personal and unpersonal, if that makes any sense, because we're all human, so we all have the same way of comprehending something. So that's what my landscapes kind of touch upon, and both from natural and urban environments.
So my name is Erik. I started to paint very early in life, and when I started in the academic level, I got into a huge crisis, and I couldn't paint anymore, and it was really hard. So I guess I'm the only one that have experienced that. That was a joke, Swedish joke, but anyway, I find rescue in turning back to a media that I used as a child, watercolor, and that was 2 years before the master degree, and since then I have continued to do that, which is now 20 years or something. And there is this concept of homo ludens, a playing being. And I think that is what I want to say as a response to your question, that we need to play, we need to have fun, we need to have a dialogue with what we do, with the work that we proceed with. And I could mention Jackson Pollock as an example that inspired me, because he was starting to drip his paint, and he said himself that when he dripped the red color, he started to dance, and the red color responded to him green. So then he put out the green, but it was like he listened to the painting, what do you want me to do? And he responded in a dancing mood. And that was sort of a help for me. And I think I'm working in a slightly similar way. What this has to do with the current world situation, it's up to you to figure out. But it would be silly if I tried to be more specific, I think. To play, to have a dialogue is important. That's my answer.
Thank you. So now I would like to ask the curator, as you know, this triennial raises an important question can painting as a medium fulfill the purpose of art, which means to encourage critical thinking, to educate, to enlighten the audience?
Well, it's, can you hear me? Okay, well, I don't think that art in general can make such a contribution if it stands alone. But if art is connected with philosophy, science, and politics, social life, question of identity, and things like that, in one way or another, then of course art can reveal information from those fields. Because visual art is a field next to philosophy, science, and politics. And there will always be some area where they are jumping into each other. But the way that the artwork does that is not the same way that science will do it, or mathematics, or language will do it. It does it on the ground of the media. That is one of the key characteristics for all this response here. In Deleuze's book about Bacon, the famous book about Bacon, in some of the chapters, Deleuze is making a very, very important distinction between perception and sensing. The sensation of sensing the world and what he called perception. And this could be an example of how art is developing our understanding of the world. Because when we have a perception of the world, we reach out to the world in such a way that we can identify what it is we are seeing. We can measure what we see. We can sort of control the object that we are looking at through the painting. But when we are sensing the world, then something happens which is different from perception, where we reach into an identity. Then we are in a flow with the world. We are observing the process in the world. We can maybe say that the painting will be a diagram over the world. Not an image of the world, but a diagram. And the diagram is hidden in the way that the artists are working, in the way that the artists are framing the process of the painting. And it is actually in that meta level that the painting can reach into other areas as science, philosophy, and politics. It's always in an indirect way, and in a way through the approach, through the methods, through the abstract element in the work, that it reaches into other fields of knowledge. So in that sense, I think art can do it, but there is a condition. It do not just do it if we do not attend with the purpose of achieve something in the meeting with the painting. It's like when you listen to a piece of modern music. If you don't listen to it in a curious way, then maybe it's just noise for you. But if you listen to it as an example of where music can be today in a historical perspective, then a piece of music can be fascinating. And so I think that if we understand that painting is an historical process, it's a historical event, and if we allow ourselves to go in, to dive into it as an instrument for philosophy, for science, for politics, then there is, of course, a diagram hidden in the work which can be activated. So, as everything else, if you are only interested in art as such, then I don't think it moves so much. But if you have knowledge, and if you have an open mind, and you can start to compare the structures in an artwork with structures in the world, then I think the painting as such can absolutely make a difference in the world. It can probably not come with a solution to the world, but it can create a difference in the world. And I think that's probably the most important thing.
Very interesting, thank you. You mentioned the history of painting, and that takes me to my next question, to Tamara, whose work, depicts a lot of, you seem to be interested in the history of painting, in a classical way of painting, in light and shadows. You work with plants a lot, with nature. And I would like to ask you, how do you approach the balance between the realism and imagination in your paintings? Because there is this juxtaposition between real and some imaginary, mysterious content in your works.
Yes, I think the whole nature is mysterious, and there's a connection between the abstract and representative, and the universe of nature is so complex that I don't really make I don't see it as a problem to be in the middle ground, because there's so much we don't know about the world. There's only this little we know about, and in my works, I think when I start a painting, I usually start with the question mark: that what is this? What is this for? And what does this say? And you know, that's the best part, when you don't know and you start to build up the painting, and it becomes what it becomes. Usually, I have a lot of plans before I start actually painting, so the design process is very meticulous. I have to be very particular with the structure of the painting, and then I have free hands to use whatever colors I like. And it's a kind of the idea is there, what I want, but it's not clear. But when I finish the painting, it will be visible. So that's also the mystery of the nature subjects, and also the mystery of the painting.
So can you a little bit talk more about the process of painting? Because if I understood you correctly now, you create these landscapes from small plants that you have in your home, or are these real places that you're looking at or taking photographs and then
I have to take you back to when I was studying. Sorry. It was, the painting was dead when I was in the end of the 90s in the art school, and nobody wanted you to paint. So of course I didn't paint, even though I had been painting since I was a little child. But in the art school I was very into photography. And then I did some works with the camera. But the result was always flat. I was really disappointed. And from there I started to make collages of the photos. And I started to use the collages as a base for my paintings. And that's what I do nowadays also. So I have a lot of images that I combine together to make one complete painting. That's my process.
Very interesting.
So you make a photo collage?
Yes. Yes.
So you have a photo collage in the studio?
I used to do work with scissors, but now I work with computer. That's very much easier, but I never usually decide about the colors. I just need to focus on the structure.
Great. One more question. You did mention briefly before that you don't aim your work to be political, but since you work so much with landscapes, nature, I have to ask you this question. You know, how do you see your work in relation to current environmental concerns and the broader discourse on ecology in contemporary art? Because there is a lot of conversation about it in the art. And
yes, they are having this conversation because of my works. No, that was a joke. But it's of course fun to be surfing on the contemporary moment. But I think for me, I've been painting these nature paintings for, 15, 20 years. And I was, at first in school, I was horrified because, old ladies who aspire to be painters paint nature subjects, especially in the 90s. It was like, you're so commercial and so kitschy and everything is bad if you're going to do nature works. But then I found this, it somehow freed me. When painting died, the field was open. And that somehow, when I was able to allow myself to do the first collage landscapes, I saw that this is my language, this is me, and this my work is very personal and recognizable, and people can relate to that. And it's also for me, it was kind of I sort of felt like all of the world is open for me from now on. So it was a very big moment in art school for me to start doing these nature works.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Since we talk a lot about landscapes with you, that brings me to Ilya's work, who is also very much interested in landscape. However, in a very different way. You work a lot with abstraction. I mean, to me personally, it looks very emotional work. But I would like to ask, what emotions or ideas do you hope to evoke in viewers, if any at all? Or is it more personal? Can you talk a little bit more about your practice, how you decide on colors, textures?
Does everyone hear me? Yeah, okay. First thing, I didn't answer the last question I realized about in regards to if my work is political or not. I would say, no, that's not my intention. It's more about being human in a way. And then how I decide on colors, it's really based on the environment that I'm like. I take pictures of everything all the time, and I'm always studying details in my environment. So colors naturally pop up. I'm also really interested in materials. So I will shift between various canvases or types of canvas, and that will change the texture in the paint and how the paint is applied. And all of these things convey certain moods, I guess. So it isn't per se emotional, but it is like presenting emotions without presenting feelings, you know? So it's like making environments. So it's based a bit in Impressionism, where you're supposed to observe. And I guess in my situation, I'm observing what's going on around me and also the memories and stories that are evoked when seeing something, as I mentioned earlier. So it's more about taking a step back and exploring the colors that you remember and the textures that you remember, and retelling somehow the experience without following a plan.
How important is the response of the audience to you, and what they feel and how they feel, and what they will take away from looking and experiencing your work?
I think I'm not so busy with the way people respond to the work. I'm busy with, for me, it's important that it communicates. So the response that I get is more than the fact that there is a response at all is more than enough for me, because then I know I'm making contact. I guess I'm really interested in post-humanism and new materialism in philosophy, and that is also tied to eco-philosophy and having a general, concern for our where we live and the people around us. So it's very based in, what do you call it? I don't know. I wouldn't call it empathy, but it's like pretty close. Yeah.
Thank you, Erik. You work a lot with pigments, watercolor and paper. You mix watercolor and paper and natural flows. You mentioned Jackson Pollock, who is known for his flows and movements while working. And I would like to ask you, how do you approach the challenge of controlling these natural flows to achieve the desired effect? And what do these fluctuating states of being represent in the broader context of your work?
I was thinking about another artist just when I hear the discussion, and it's William Turner, English landscape painter. And when I was an art student, some teacher told me the story about how he was obsessed with bad weather at the sea, and he tied himself into the ship. What do you call the mast? And went out right into the storm and made drawings of the storm. And it have stayed with me as inspiration, as well as Jackson Pollock. I guess we are today in a global storm somehow, like with the environment. There is something going on when I start a painting. I usually start with soaking the paper, quite huge, quite big paper pieces, and putting them on a table that I can tilt, right? So that the soaked water is gradually both condensating and moving around on the surface of the paper. And that situation, I start to add the pigments more or less fluid with water. And when I drip out those things, there is a sort of a situation that I cannot control, right? And I need to negotiate with the process. I'm not fully free to do whatever I want. I need to respond to what's going on if I don't want it to just become what it is at the moment. So in a way, I am active. That situation activates me to act. It's a serious business somehow to be there at that, because you want to do something beautiful, right? That could catch someone else's. So I want to reach out to an audience, but it is as if a more deeper sense, the painting is a way to exist at the moment.
I have another question. I know that your preferred technique is watercolor on paper. Can you tell us why? Why not? Why watercolor on paper?
I mentioned that I was having a crisis because it was in the 90s or a little bit later, so we were not sure is painting dead or not when I was a student, but most people said it's dead still. But there was people painting in Stockholm at that time, but still I couldn't really find myself continuing. Maybe it was about self-confidence, personal things. It's not interesting. But anyway, I went to France and I met Elby Soyer in Beaux-Arts in Paris. And when I met her and her, that context also, the French, Parisian art world sort of made me able to breathe again, you know? And with that experience, as I told you, I started to use works on paper that was not at that time really visual, like what do you say, established. So in China, for example, it is since thousands of years, but I didn't know about that so much. But in Stockholm, it was like a field that was not taken or accepted as something real. So I was playing around, basically.
Thank you. Ivan, your paintings often blur the lines between figuration and abstraction. What draws you into this interplay, and how do you want the viewers to engage with this duality in your work?
A long time ago, I think, I realized that when you're painting on a flat surface, and I paint based on photos, I can really do anything, because it's like the photo shows something from the real world, but the photo is just a photo, and I transfer it to another flat surface, so I'm free to reconstruct the whole space. So that's has turned my paintings into sort of a puzzle. Originally I worked on white canvases, as a lot of people do when they start painting, and I think I constantly question my own limitations for my work. So I went on to transparent covered canvases, went on to raw canvases, went on to do I even need to use canvases, starting using other fabrics, and now it's panels because it's a solid surface and I can combine all kinds of materials to work on. So, as I said earlier, I draw a lot of inspiration from mathematics, and since 10 years I've been working a lot with nature in some form as a basis. It was a bit of a counter reaction to what I did earlier, where I did a lot of work based on architecture. So, and I think I had this resentment Tamara also mentioned about paintings of nature is what old people do as a hobby. But yeah, the creating of the puzzle is, I think, is a bit inspired from mathematics and from pattern recognition. I like to give a puzzle to the viewer that makes them need to take a lot of time looking at my work and discovering connections around on the surface. I use, as I said, various materials that may have create associations to concrete construction sites, and something is maybe a bit of an old curtain and so on. So each little piece maybe tells its own story.
Yes, I have to say that you usually work with mixed media on plywood. It's very, I love that each of your works are so different, and thanks to Henrik, I think his selection was actually to present the diversity of the Nordic contemporary art scene. And you create these hybrid pieces that unite realism and abstraction, figuration and landscapes. It seems that you challenge the traditionality of painting. Can you talk a little bit more of the process in the studio, and is it right to say that you're trying to challenge the traditional ways of painting?
Well, I think I'm challenging my own artistic production in a way. So that's really the main goal. What have I done? What could I maybe do in a different way? I think I'm a problem solver personality. So it's always trying to figure it out. How can I do this differently? And I like to leave little parts of figuration, which is sort of the code that you need to understand the whole painting. And then suddenly, hopefully, the other more abstract parts maybe makes some kind of sense to the viewer.
Torben, a couple of questions to you. Your work is very conceptual, frequently incorporates elements from the domestic space that you mentioned yourself before, and some socioeconomic realities, sometimes blending the traditional painting techniques, the abstract painting techniques, with digital aesthetics, with cropping, prints, and so on, such as crop photographs, for example. How do you see it reflecting or critiquing contemporary culture?
When it comes to the material choices, I think I'm just using whatever is around me, because I really enjoy looking for the painterly quality of the everyday life. So if I can use a wood chip wallpaper that most of people know from, at least in Denmark and in Germany, it's pretty popular, or some ugly tiles, and make some interesting art out of that. I find that more interesting than using traditional art supplies. I'm not sure it's a critique of contemporary culture. It's just how it turned out. I'm embarrassed to say, but I've been working as an artist for 20 years and I still have no clue what I'm doing. So that's perhaps my starting point, even though I often start with a plan. Every time I have to do a show or work, and it ends up somewhere completely different. Maybe there's a critique of the artist's role in society and the economy surrounding the artist in some of my works, as you can see at the show. For example, there's a painting with a jacket hanging on top of it, expensive Paul Smith jacket I bought many years ago, and I tried to sell it online for a few years, but nobody wanted to buy it. So now I incorporate it into a painting and try to sell it that way. So it's often very low practical stuff that surrounds my stuff. Or the other painting with 1 year consumption of toilet paper. It's like a bonus if you buy that painting, you get toilet paper for a year. So it's I'm just trying to make a living and trying to make a living for my kids. And the easiest way to do that as an artist is to make paintings. That's the most commercial painting. I read an analyst recently that 66% of all sale when it comes to contemporary art is from painting. So that's a good way.
It's incredible how you actually, I was about to ask you to unpack a couple of your works, including the work with the toilet paper that everybody can come and view in the Kaunas Picture Gallery, but you've done it already. So my question then to you would be, how do you see the future of painting in a world increasingly dominated by digital media?
Well, unlike Henrik, I'm not too optimistic about the role of art in society as a whole, and especially not when it comes to painting. I think most of it is just commodities and entertainment, and maybe that's okay. So it's not going to play a huge role in society, I think. When it comes to digital art and AI and whatever, I think it still is more interesting than AI-generated images because of the physical aspects of it, and also because it's made by humans. And I think most digital art is extremely boring because it doesn't have this physical side of it, and it doesn't have the failures or the anxiety or all the problems that human beings are walking around with. Doesn't have that. So in a way, I think there'll always be room for painting because it's just a surface where you can project your feelings or thoughts, anxieties on it, and there will always be need for that. If it'll be relevant for society as a whole, I'm not so sure, but we'll see.
Basically, one more question that I will ask. We did touch a little bit on the fact that a lot of, art is kind of created in response to global issues, whether they be social or political, environmental. Do you feel a responsibility to address these topics through your art as an artist? Do you feel this responsibility on you?
I think we, as individuals, already have a stance and a view on the current global situation. And I think that is a part of what I do, at least, even though it's not something that's not the basis of the work that I do, but it is there. Like how I react to the current political climate in Europe, it seeps through one way or another. It's like by taking a stance as being non-political and also focusing on human interactions, it is a reaction in a sense, So I think regardless, it kind of comes through in the end.
Holistically, I think that everything that anyone does is connected to the rest of the world. So actually we are not able to do anything without affecting each other. even on our iPhone, every click counts. But if I'm allowed to talk very shortly about the nature aspects of my work, is during the pandemic situation, in some countries we were not allowed to go outdoors even, but in Sweden we were. So I did a lot with my kids, and what I was seeing myself do more and more was to listen to the nature somehow, to listen to the silence, which doesn't exist according to John Cage, or you listen to yourself somehow, your breathing, your heartbeat, your nervous system. So I brought that into the painting field as well, like trying to listen to what's going on in the studio, listen to the process of the valeur, the black, the white, the gray shadows.
I think it'll be more important what you do as an individual, as an artist. So it's more important how you vote, how you act, what you eat, how much you fly, and whatever. Because if you all had to react, if it was mandatory to address these things of the world in art, it could be kind of boring. If you had to do pro-Palestina, you had to do climate, relevant art, and blah, blah, blah. It will be very, similar, you know. So no, I don't think it's mandatory to do that in art. Maybe the opposite would be better, you know, to have some with the wrong opinions.
I'm pretty much agreeing with Torben, and also I think as painters, doing something that's commenting on a political situation and so on could, first of all, easily become banal, and also it's an unnecessary extra layer to put on something to communicate a statement. If it's about saying stop what's going on in Gaza or stop the war in Ukraine, it would be smarter just to make a poster. There's no point in making it in a painting.
I think that from a media point of view, something interesting is happening from the 60s and up till today. Because in a lot of artistic projects, I'm not quite sure that we actually can detect who is expressing who. In land art, for instance, is it the nature who is expressing itself through the artist? Or is it the artist who uses the landscape to express his own vision? And for instance, in light and space tradition, with work like James Turrell, are we quite sure that we have a human project here, which is under the control from a human scale? Or is it more that it is the Big Bang who is looking at us when we look through the hole in the building, in the desert, in a James Turrell project? And a little bit the same, I mean, we could actually, I think there is right now from a philosophical, but also from a political point of view, a kind of feeling that the universe would like to have an encounter with us. And nature would like to have an encounter with us. The surroundings would like to have an encounter with us on its own condition. And therefore, I think that if you follow modern science, philosophy, and so on, there is a strong feeling that when we activate something, there is an intervention from the universe. There is an intervention from nature through our media and through our human institutions. So I think that if this question should be responded, there will be a kind of there'll be a scale of different response to that. But I think that, as Erik was saying before, no matter what we do, if we have an open mind to the media, I think that it is not only ourselves as human beings who are presenting something, we are also inviting in the forces from the universe and in nature to sort of express their forces in the media. And I think that is maybe a new situation which is becoming more and more clear. In very general sense.
Thank you. So I have one final question from me, and then we will take questions from the audience. What do you hope the audiences to take away from your work when they encounter it at this triennial? So it's your specific works that we are exhibiting. I did ask Ilya a question, how important is the viewer's interpretation to you? So perhaps you can expand as well. And do you leave multiple readings of your work? Do you leave multiple readings of your work? Or is it rather a specific message that you're aiming to translate to the audiences?
Yeah, I think the answers were pretty cut out and clear. I really like to not give any information about my work. I want it to be a completely open interpretation.
That's great invitation for all to visit.
I don't want people to start reading something into something because I said something.
Torben?
Yeah, no, I don't have any specific reaction that I'm going for. But I remember there was a talk with Lawrence Weiner, the famous conceptual artist at the Academy when I attended. And he had a quote that went something like, when people see his murals in the city, he said something like that, I don't want to ruin people's day on the way to a job. I want to fuck up their life. And I was hoping to do something a bit similar, but maybe in a smaller scale. But I want to question things and question people's life and question my own life. And yeah, probably don't succeed, but I want to try.
Yes, I'm not interested about explaining away the contents of my paintings. So they are open to all kinds of interpretations. And yeah, just if you have some time to stop and see them, that's wonderful.
I don't really think so much about how someone else will read it. The fact that it is brought into a context and then it has been read in a certain way, and if that is, then something has been said. It doesn't have to be. I don't have a clear idea how something will land in somebody else's mind. And it's also just one more thing about new movements and like the forces around us in a way. But if we speak through the medium or not, in a sense, we are of nature. So maybe it's more natural for us to express ourselves, period. It's not like we are not differentiated from an urban or natural landscape. We are a part, we are it. So there is a responsibility there. And we'll have to take it in the end anyway. So
I don't think it's possible to affect an audience in any way by this way of wishing or expecting something. I don't think it's possible because people think what they think. People are stubborn. And maybe if I can wish something, it is that for the audience, that if you are touched by something, please contact the artist and let them know, because we need to hear that. We are kind of lonely in our studios most of the time, and then there's an opening and there's a lot of people, and it's really hard to be there at that moment, because you feel like an animal in the zoological specimen. If someone says to you, "This works touched me," or meant something, it's really good to hear. It keeps us going.
So now we have maybe a few questions from the audience. Yes?
So I have the question for Erik. So what do you think? How does human emotions changes his view of the surroundings?
In the painting situation, or in any out there in the nature, or
maybe more in the painting.
Yeah, in the. I guess this is something that develops by time. Your ability to see and to listen to what is going on is something that you can practice and gradually become better at. So in this way, being an artist is really a wonderful work because you get slowly better at it by time. But how it happens is really hard to, I mean, sometimes you sense it in the stomach, kind of. In the Asian culture, you talk about the stomach as a center. In the Western culture, you talk about the heart as something that is in your core is responding. But to explain how it's happening, I'm not able to do that.
It is very interesting because different kind of emotions make us to think and notice different kind of things in the surroundings. So it's pretty interesting. Also, all of what you said.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Henrik talked about the Deleuze writings about Francis Bacon and how the senses, how to sense something, is a way to approach the creativity. And I guess that's what your question is about. How you can gradually go find a path or a trace by sensing when you work. Thank you.
Anyone else wants to answer, or shall we take?
I think emotions in general, they influence how we perceive everything. So you can see one object or an item and it will change according to the way the mood or what has happened. So you can like re-meet something several times based on the emotions that you've moved through. So for me, or the way I think about it, it's a little bit alpha omega, and it's also quite interesting to sort of trace or track that a little bit. And like with colors or materials, emotions can also be that, you can get to know them through your work, and then you recognize it and it becomes a tool. So I think it's intrinsic to making as well. Yeah.
Thank you. Is there any more questions from the audience?
This is a question for whoever wants to answer it. So we all can agree that art is very influential. People often repeat it, and art students, art lecturers in this academy as well. But how many people do you actually see influenced by your art to the point you are satisfied with?
Probably nobody.
Nobody?
But I can say that my work is heavily influenced by everything else, so, by everyone. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I'm very interested in art as a medium to actually influence views or emotions of other people. So I would like to ask people who have experience with this.
When I was young and just graduated, I became quite angry if people didn't react to my work. And now it's more often that I get quite pleased and happy if one person appreciates something in it. So, and that's my advice also. And talking about emotions, I think emotions is overrated. I don't believe in inspiration so much. I believe in creating a circumstance that fits your way of working. The better you create the circumstance, the more fun you will have.
Yeah. First of all, I think most art students should have a reality check on how big an influence the art will have going further on. Secondly, the most people I get reaction from are like family and friends, and I get really happy when one of my friends and colleagues liked what I did, and that's how I measure success, because most of the people, like 98% of the people who see my works doesn't respond to me, so I have no idea what they think. So it's kind of hard to measure what kind of influence you have. But there's a few people, 5 or 6 people, whose opinion I really validate. So that's kind of the success for me.
Well, actually, I think that a lot of us here was actually telling that art is not so influential in our talks here. So, and I think that in my own practice, I think I got something like 700 people who maybe think what I am doing is interesting and have a real interest in it. So I think that, if you talk about the art as an influential element, it is because it can create differences, but also from the existence of the artwork, you can reconnect the world in a new way. Because because the encounter with the artwork give you an opportunity to, so to speak, create bridges to other fields, which you then can understand on a new condition. So I think that I agree with Torben. I think it's to go out as an artist and think that you are changing your world, the world around you, through an agenda or in a specific area is a monumental approach today, because there are so many other forces who are creating our identity and our social network, the economy, superpower, military system, politics, government plans, and so on. So I think that we have, in a way, to be a little bit humble when we work with art, and also have patience, have time, believe that on the long term, what we do has, as Torben was saying before, an indirectly effect. But also a kind of art is an attractor in our culture, which from time to time attract and bring new connection into our reality. And I think that if that happens, I think that's enough, actually. Because otherwise, I think that we are trying to instrumentalize the art so much that we may be killing the event of the artwork. We are killing the process of the artwork. Don't misunderstand me, because I'm very, very political in many, many ways. And I'm very politically active, actually. I mean, I am on mail with ministers in the government and things like that. So I'm involved in politics. But I think that science and art, philosophy, the philosophy make concepts. Art makes, science makes experimentation. And I think that when art is really, really good, it can create a kind of attractor where it can reconnect the reality around us. But we cannot predict how it do it. And that is the secret about art, in my opinion.
It's also about the enjoyment of making things and like having conversation partners that you find in school. You know, I mean, I do this because I enjoy it, and I enjoy communicating with my peers and seeing what they do, and we comment on things, and like we play with our work. And that's sort of the main initiative here, is to like and you build small enclaves and networks that you stick to, and you do projects together, and then something happens in that little bubble. That's really great.
So art cannot prove anything, it just has to be convincing.
Okay, well then we will wrap it up. Thank you very much, everyone, for listening. Thank you for participating. I think it was a very nice conversation that we had. And now, as Agle invited you in the beginning of this panel discussion, we are inviting you to come with us to Meno Parkas Gallery. And then, of course, later on at 7 o'clock, we have the grand opening at the Kaunas Picture Gallery, where you will be able to see and experience all the artworks and art practices that we discussed today.